So, hey guys, today we're going to be talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! In the year, I guess, 2026. So, this year so far, I feel like the thing that's most notable is I don't think going second, like, majorly improved. And by that, I mean, well, it has improved in some ways, but that actually depends on your perspective. So, if we think about it just from a slightly different perspective, right? So, if we look at, let's say, Cool Tune, okay? Or we look at Draco Tail. Well, these decks do have a bit better going second ability than, let's say, decks from a year ago, because your cards essentially gain additional effects if your opponent controls cards. And the reasoning behind them controlling cards would likely be that they went first, right? That, or this is also your interruption for turn two. So either way, these effects are activating on the second turn, I suppose, one way or another. So yeah, you have like the Cool Tune and Draco Tail effects to like pop, negate monsters, pop back row, whatever, right? But then let's take another step back, and we have a simple statement that we can make that is also going to be true. Cool Tune and Draco Tail are both going first decks, so they still prefer going first. So then, taking another step back, let's ask this simple question. Is there a going second deck that's actually improved? Like, do we have a decent going second strategy or something? Like, um, any deck that would exclusively want to or primarily go second? Like, usually if you're going first, you still have something to do in general, but is there a deck that wants to go second? Like their cards are better going second for some reason? Like good enough that value that you would not want to go first, but you would actually prefer going second. Um, in terms of engine, no, not really. I don't think that deck actually exists. So unless it's going to get released within like I don't know the next 6 months or so, that it might not be till like 2027 till we might see a deck like that if we do see one at all. But yeah, I mean in terms of newer archetypes, we have Heka Hands. Not much to say about Heka Hands. Cool Tune, not much to say about that in regards to like straight up focusing on going second, because well, you also have to consider mirrors also exist. So very rarely now, well, I mean, yeah, the majority of mirrors, the going first player could just have a massive advantage because, you know, part of it is your deck can't usually deal with your own interruptions. So you're in disadvantage there. There's some exceptions, like for example, Tenpai. Yeah, that deck doesn't really do much going first, so going second, you're a lot better off. Or like Kishtira, where you can go Rise Heart into Zeus to completely wipe the board. Utilizing any cash, and that's just completely not respondable with any piece of like Kishtira engine unless you like really prepared for it. And even then, it's still a bit risky for one reason or another. So yeah, that's a bit miserable. So what do we got cooking here? Absolutely nothing, really. In terms of going second at least. So if we look at just purely going first decks, those have had, well, just better a better ability to go second into other like pre-established boards or established boards or end boards or whatever, right? But in terms of just in general going second, we haven't really seen any improvements in those regards. So for example, hand traps are yeah, they're feeling terrible at the moment because most decks have multiple starters slash extenders, so just cards that can be starters, or in case their starters get interrupted, they can be additionally also used as extenders on top of their starters, whatever that might be. So for example, normal summon mouse, dormouse, and then we have March Hare able to extend, the field spell able to extend, and then we also have Gold Sark, which can extend. So with the exception of March Hare, all of those cards are also starters, so they're also one card combos that get you into like full combo, pretty much. And that applies to like most decks have multiple of these kinds of cards now. So just a single interruption isn't going to be that much value. Also worth considering, because these cards are also starters and extenders and not just extenders, a single hand trap isn't as killer as it would have been before. So before, a lot of decks would have somewhat of a choke point where you would want to somewhat hold your hand traps instead of just immediately shotgunning them. And usually, a deck would have a trade in almost sort of effect where you get like more mileage, right? Like a very heavy mileage card, essentially. So if we literally did activate, like I guess a trade in, you have to activate the trade in, and then you have to discard a card for trade in. So that means you go -2 on activation, and after resolution, you go even, right? So if we drop a Ash Blossom, that's a -1 on you. So overall, +1. And that's how the value on Ash was pretty crazy, because there used to be a good amount of choke points, kind of like trade in a decent amount of decks, like just straight up. But when you don't have anything like that, there's just a lot of misery, because, well, there's just no value on your Ash Blossom in comparison to like what the starters and extenders can do. I mean, worst case scenario is they drop something similar to a Mathmech Circular, in the sense that we have send Sigma to the graveyard, right? And then special summon Sigma, trigger Circular to search, and that's the first point where you can like Ash. And yeah, there's just no way that Ash Blossom Joy Spring can hit any point of a circular combo and for it to actually be super relevant. Assuming you play like an anti-Ash line, because there is one point where it's like sort of relevant. If you grab like the trap instead of the Monster Reborn, then you go ahead and go into Alimbertion, attempt to search. At that point, if you Ash, you can actually stop the combo. But if we do the same thing but with the Monster Reborn, there is no longer a single point where you can Ash Blossom Joy Spring this, which is kind of irritating in a way, honestly. But yeah, the value you get from your starters and extenders, they're much higher than before. And then on top of this, now you have just a lot more ability to deal with targeting, specifically targeting like hand traps. So notably like Effect Valor and also Infinite Impermanence. All of those cards, they're kind of like iffy. So with Blue Eyes probably, this is closer to, I guess, like Mathmech Circular territory with how this works, but it's not like quite that bad, I suppose. So you normal summon Sage with Eyes of Blue, okay? And then if you negate Sage with Eyes of Blue, they can still go into the Link one, going into Spirit with Eyes of Blue. So this isn't like full combo by any means, but you still have like continuation plays. And this is assuming your opponent would be on just one card and they genuinely only have Sage with Blue with Eyes of Blue. But then, you know, in reality, that's not going to be the case. Well, let me do a quick showcase, because you're going to be playing 3 copies of Sage with Eyes of Blue, okay? And then you're going to be playing 3 copies of Maiden. This is the wrong Maiden, but pretend it's the right one. And then you have 3 copies of Wishes. So overall, these 9 cards are going to be your primary starters, okay? So what are the odds that your opponent doesn't additionally have a Wishes for Eyes of Blue, or a Sage, or Maiden? Because all of these are technically all extenders after you were to hit this card. So if you hit them with like an Imperm, like there's also the value, I suppose, of, so this is assuming Imperm does get to resolve, right? There are a lot of decks kind of like this where you have so many starters, extenders, you can just tank an Imperm kind of wherever, because you have so many starter extenders. So you would need multiple interruptions to deal with additional like extenders and such. So in this case, technically, if we want to fully break down this board, let's say you have access to just like 2 Sage, normal summon Sage, yada yada, this gets negated, okay, and then normal summon second Sage, this also gets negated. Then we can go Spirit with Eyes of Blue, summon Blue Eyes White Dragon, and this goes into the 9, and this is technically 2 interruption, at least 1 if you go into the Spirit Dragon. So despite taking 2 interruptions, they still have an interruption, I suppose. And this isn't their best line by any means. But yeah, that's the general idea, I suppose. If we are to look for decks that just randomly play around like Imperm, we have, well, not all of them are as random, but Malice. You can actually leave Lingribo on your field, like whilst you do combo. Like it requires certain hands sometimes, usually 2-card combos, I think. But because you have Lingribo sitting on the field, your opponent cannot A, Imperm you, B, Dominus Purge, C, Dominus Impulse. All of those are kind of like disabled. If we go to Unchained, this deck kind of fallen off, but Sharvara. So you have 3 copies of Sharvara, 3 copies of Abomination's Prison. Nice try, good luck effect Valoring or dropping an Imperm on any of these cards, because I can just chain Sharvara to it. What are you going to do about it, you know? And then I guess this example, we have Cool Tune, which if we activate Cool Tune Synchro, this will also allow us to dodge targeting stuff. We have Yummy, which does it like with every single one of the cards, basically, with how this deck kind of functions. So Imperm Valor feels like it has absolutely no mileage here. So I guess we can put these into 2 general camps. We'll say simply we have like decks that can just straight up hang the Imperm or Valor or whatever, right? You're a targeted hand trap, or technically it could be an interruption, like a literal just kind of pop effect. So that's camp 1, and then camp 2 would be just, okay, you just can't target me at all. Well, any targeted effect, I can just dodge it for whatever reason. So you tank it or you dodge it, or avoid it, I suppose. So yeah, those are the 2 general camps I would put most of these kind of in at the moment. But because of this, like, in terms of hand trapping, I don't know. Maybe you could argue they're trying to like push out hand traps for something else, and there's going to be open design space for that, and they're going to like introduce something a little bit different, like just conceptually something different. Maybe like we're going to see more in-engine kind of hand traps or turn 0 plays to replace hand traps, which I think I would genuinely prefer somewhat. But if those cards are also going to like target, then kind of moot point, because they'll be as useless as Ash Blossom Joy Spring versus Mavmech Circular, you know? Well, it depends what we actually end up getting, I guess. But yeah, there's just nothing going on at the moment. Like, for the long term, it could end up being good, because we are kind of in, I guess we'll say, an eternal format. So all of our cards, like the best way to remove a card, like there is a ban list, right? But the better way than removing a card is just like power creeping it, honestly, so that even if it's not banned, you just won't end up playing it, because there's something that's going to be better. And because that thing's better, it makes that card not as playable, which is almost as good as like banning it straight up, right? So like with Ash Blossom Joyous Spring, you won't really need to ban that, or maybe like let's say Infinite Impermanence, because that card's been like super strong for a long time. Even Droll and Lockbird, you won't necessarily need to ban it. Like there was a period in time where for some reason every single deck in that meta was just super drollable, and therefore if your opponent has droll, you essentially lose if you cannot stop the droll, which there was a good chance you just couldn't stop it for whatever reason. Yeah, I mean, technically you can't really run Called by the Grave in the meta because it's super heavy samurai. So if you did drop Called by the Grave, your super heavy samurai cards just would stop functioning anyway. So yeah, that'd be pretty solved. I mean, technically you could play like Prohibition, which would require you to preemptively declare Drone Lockbird every single time, but that is neither here nor there. So yeah, I mean, Droll, the way Droll kind of fell off like was mostly because all of the decks they released after had text that prevented your opponent from activating Droll in a sort of way. So for example, with Centurion, you have a few effects. We have notably these three. So we have Emblema of, which sets a spell trap directly from your deck. It places a monster in your spell and trap zone. And then we also have place monster from your deck in the spell and trap zone. And then this one does the same thing again. So none of these actually add a card. And then your one card, well, you technically only have two cards that add cards. So it would be Primera and also Auxilla, which genuinely it doesn't even really matter that much. But yeah, you can't really droll unless I add a card, specifically add a card. Even if I do a card that's effectively like adding a card, so notably in Yubel with Nightmare Pain, whenever you summon Spirit of Yubel, it gives you the option to add, but you can just set. And they also give that to Tenpai, so it's not really that drollable, right? But yeah, basic idea here is that you just set the card and then activate it instead of adding it to your hand and then activating it, which is the only change they made for the most part to a lot of these decks, where they have this type of effect, but we still have some decks that primarily add cards, like Mitsurugi. And because of that, like, a lot of decks, they're not as droll weak as before. There was a decent period, I think, where Joel was kind of flip floppy, where it either did absolutely nothing or it completely like crushed a deck. And now it's, well, it shouldn't ever lean to the point where it just crushes every single deck again, because all of the decks are more built with Droll in mind now, right? So going forward, as long as Droll is in the game, worth mentioning, I suppose, is that all future decks you will have to somewhat consider Droll. Like, do we want this archetype to like completely die to Droll, or do we want to make it so they set whatever they're searching instead? So in which case, Droll is not going to be really activatable, or it's going to work as like a super delayed Ash Blossom. In the case of something like Centurion, where you can't really droll the Primera, like, well, you can droll after the Primera search, so that'll only affect the Auxilla search, which is not going to be that much mileage, in the sense that if instead of droll you would Ash Blossom, assuming it was one card combo, normal summon Primera, Ash would have stopped that, but droll does not stop that. It does lower your opponent's ceiling a little bit, in the sense that they won't be able to do like Auxilla Surge, right? So yeah, right now in 2026, I feel like going second did improve, but mostly only for going first decks, which is weird. But I mean, progress is progress. Although I would like I got more progress in the sense that when I think of going second deck in the year 2026, absolutely nothing comes up, right? We had like Makanko and Tenpai in our last 2 years. I don't remember exactly when both of those archetypes were released, but yeah, the way they played going second, not a fan, but they were going second decks. I suppose. In this year, I don't remember really getting any specific like going second deck. So yeah, not so happy about that because without some going second decks to some extent, it does cause a decent amount of staling in the game in my opinion. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.